A lot of the times being trans, you don't get the choice of how people see you. And so being affirmed helps me feel like people see the real me, and it means everything.
It makes me feel good because I went through so much without having resources of the education and even the knowledge of what was going on within my own body. It makes you feel very confident.
It gives me the assurance that they care about who I am as an individual.
We all want to be respected for who we are. As a New York State employee, you work for one of the most diverse, inclusive, and fair-minded states in the country. You play a critical role in creating and maintaining a safe and affirming environment for gender-expansive people, or people of all gender identities, including those who identify as transgender and gender nonconforming, also referred to as TGNC. Over the next few minutes, you'll gain a better understanding of the following topics: gender identity, pronoun usage, gender-neutral language, workplace confidentiality and disclosure, and gender-based microaggressions, to help ensure all gender identities are respected in the workplace, and diverse, equitable, and inclusive services are available to all New Yorkers. We'll also hear from members of the TGNC community on why representation, inclusion, and respect matter so much. It's also important to note that you may come across some terms and acronyms you may not be familiar with. Although we'll provide you with a basic understanding of commonly used terms and acronyms relating to the TGNC community, we highly encourage you to refer to the language primer provided in the Gender Identity Toolkit, which is available on the New York statewide learning management system. It's a great resource that can help ensure that you identify, describe, and address all TGNC coworkers, customers, and vendors in an accurate manner. The language primer is also continually updated with the latest information as language evolves. Please check it out and refer to it often. While the primer and the rest of this training are important resources as you take steps to being a TGNC ally in the workplace, remember that language continues to evolve, and people's identities evolve too. The best way to know how a person identifies or what they would like to be called is to listen to what they call themselves. Unless you have an opportunity to ask, listen to individuals when they share their name, pronouns, or information about their gender. That is the best way to know what language they would like you to use to refer to them. Now, it's time to learn more about gender identity. Let's begin with the basics. Every person has a sex assigned at birth, a gender identity, and a sexual orientation. Each of these parts develop independently from one another and are associated with different aspects of the human body. Sex assigned at birth, which you may often see written as sex, is related to our physical anatomy at birth. Gender identity is formed in the brain and is an individual's concept of self as either male, female, a blend of both, or neither. This can start at a young age. For many people, their gender identity aligns with their sex assigned at birth, meaning they are cisgender. For example, an individual assigned female at birth whose gender identity is also female. However, some individuals develop a gender identity that is different than their sex assigned at birth, meaning they are transgender. For example, an individual assigned female at birth whose gender identity is male. This person might say at a young age that they are a boy, or they don't understand why people think they are a girl. Additionally, it is possible for a person to develop a gender identity that exists outside the gender binary, which is a system of viewing gender as two opposite categories known as male and female. When a person develops a gender identity outside the binary, they don't identify as either male or female exclusively. Some examples include non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer, agender, and gender nonconforming. Sexual orientation refers to an individual's romantic, emotional, or sexual attraction to another person. While gender identity is about who you are, sexual orientation is about who you want to partner with or are attracted to. This means that being transgender is not the same as being gay, lesbian, or bisexual, although some transgender individuals may also identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, asexual, or other. As a reminder, language and people evolve. That means that how someone identifies at one point in their life might not be the same as how they identify at another point in their life. This may not be too common, but when it happens, you may either be told directly by the individual, or you may get clues by them changing their pronouns or other signals. If you were confused, you could always ask the individual if how they identify has changed since you last interacted with them. If you do, please remember that disclosing information about gender is deeply personal. So be mindful of your relationship with someone and your own motivations for asking before you ask about this type of information.
People are so used to walking through life like, that person looks like a man, I'm gonna call him he. That person looks like a woman, I'm gonna call her she. You know, they, it's like, for a lot of people, what does they look like?
Some people see it, as just an easy process from the outside. You're figuring yourself out, and then you have to tell people directly, this is who I am, but you're still figuring it out. So there's a bit of pause there.
Transitioning is not a one-way street. It's not a single destination. It's not a place that I end up. It's about figuring out how I want to be and what's right for me.
So what is a pronoun, and how are they used? In general, a pronoun is a word that takes the place of another noun. For example, John went to the store and he bought a loaf of bread. The word he is the pronoun, replacing the noun John. Some common pronouns include he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. Traditionally, he, him, his, and she, her, hers are gendered pronouns, associated with boys or men and girls or women, respectively. They, them, theirs can be used as gender-neutral pronouns or plural pronouns, depending on the noun they're replacing. We all use pronouns all day, every day, to refer to other people. If someone identifies their pronouns, they're defining how they want to be referenced in terms of their gender identity. By referring to that individual using their specified pronouns, you're showing them respect, further affirming their gender identity. Also, you cannot assume someone's pronouns based on their looks. Although there are often stereotypical standards for appearance and dress, there is no real objective standard for determining a person's gender identity or pronouns. The external appearance of one's gender identity through behavior, clothing, hairstyle, and voice is known as gender expression. However, like gender identity, gender expression may or may not conform to socially defined behaviors or characteristics typically associated with the sex assigned to an individual at birth. Therefore, it is best to avoid making assumptions and to use the gender-neutral pronouns they, them, theirs until you're told otherwise. Identifying one's pronouns is also not limited to the TGNC community and is something we can all do. You do not know someone's name until you're told, and pronouns are the same. In fact, by defining your pronouns, you're acting in solidarity with the TGNC community by letting others know you understand the importance of using correct pronouns. It also helps to recognize you as an aspiring ally of the LGBTQ+ community. There are many ways that you can identify your pronouns in the workplace. During a meeting, you can include your pronouns when you introduce yourself. For example, "Hi, my name is Maria. I work in the Department of Budget, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs." You can add your pronouns to your email signature. Also, you can wear a pin or a button around the office that silently defines your pronouns. Together, these simple acts can contribute to a safe and affirming work culture. However, regardless of our best efforts, it is common to make mistakes. This is especially true when it comes to referring to people you've known for a long time, such as a coworker or a client. The best thing to do when you make a mistake is to repeat the sentence using the correct pronoun or name, and to just move on. For instance, when speaking about your coworker Adrian, who uses they, them pronouns, you might say, "When Adrian gets back from vacation, let's add him to this recurring meeting." I meant to say, "When Adrian gets back, let's add them to this recurring meeting." Additionally, at some point, you may make a mistake while in front of the person whose name or pronoun you've mistaken. In this situation, your initial reaction may be to apologize profusely to make up for misspeaking. However, this can draw unwanted attention or make the person feel uncomfortable. Best practice is to simply correct the mistaken pronoun or name, as we did earlier, and move on. It's important to note, making a mistake is not the same as refusing to use a person's pronoun, known as misgendering, or refusing to use a person's chosen name, known as dead naming. Depending on the circumstances, misgendering and dead naming can be considered acts of discrimination by the New York State Division of Human Rights. They can also be very triggering or hurtful for members of the TGNC community, resulting in an intense emotional or physical reaction, such as a panic attack. Triggers can be anything that reminds someone of previous trauma, and unfortunately, many members of the TGNC community have experienced bullying, harassment, and even violence while being misgendered or dead-named. While we said that making a mistake is not the same as refusing to use a person's pronouns, repeatedly making the same mistake without making intentional effort to use the accurate pronouns or names can be a microaggression, and we will discuss that later in the training.
Everybody has a way that they need to be referred to, and it's just respectful to follow people's own lead.
Having those peers and coworkers, even team management teams, just address you as what they see and not try to assume or dig under the shell, it's very pleasing.
If you do make an assumption and you are corrected, take it in stride. All you have to do is apologize and then use the correct pronouns and then move on.
We often use gendered language in everyday communication. You may use terms like wife or husband, son or daughter, and niece or nephew when referring to your family, or the pronouns he, him, his, or she, her, hers when referring to a man or woman. Historically, many careers also conveyed gender in their titles, based on who traditionally held the position, such as fireman, congressman, or stewardess. However, using gendered language like this can foster stereotypes and create an environment where not everyone feels included or represented. It may also lead to assumptions about someone's gender identity or sexual orientation. For example, a coworker may have a non-binary child, so they avoid using the term son or daughter when talking about them at work. Unintentionally, someone may see a photo of the child on the coworker's desk and ask, "How old is your son?" which assumes the child identifies as a boy. Similarly, a female client may mention she lives with her spouse. However, when people see her wedding band, they may ask her about her husband, assuming that her partner is male and that she's heterosexual. By using gender-neutral language, you can contribute to an inclusive environment, free of stereotypes and assumptions. For instance, you can easily substitute wife or husband, son or daughter, and niece or nephew for their gender-neutral counterparts, spouse, child, and family member. As previously mentioned, you cannot assume someone's pronouns, so it's best practice to use the gender-neutral pronouns they, them, theirs, until that individual tells you otherwise. Also, to break away from stereotypes, you can use terms like firefighter, congressperson, and flight attendant when discussing careers. However, when someone has clearly defined their gender identity, it is okay to use the gendered language to reflect their identity. Remember, listening to the language that people use to define themselves is the best way to know how to refer to someone. Written communications, such as forms, contracts, and policies, should always incorporate gender-neutral language. For example, a staff memo may read, "An employee may use his or her accrual time to attend the event." Using his or her does not include people who use they-them pronouns or individuals who identify outside of the gender binary. To be more inclusive, a revised version of the memo may read, "An employee may use their accrual time to attend the event." State entities are encouraged to use gender-neutral language in memos, reports, policies, and more. Speak with your supervisor about reviewing your agency's written communications to see if there are places where updates can be made to include gender-neutral language.
I notice when people are making an effort to not use gendered language, it means the world to me. It really does. It's nice to feel like I exist.
I don't want to assume that just because someone was assigned female or male at birth, that that's how they choose to carry on their daily lives.
It allows everyone to be included. It doesn't exclude people for being different.
Decisions on how and when to disclose one's gender identity are deeply personal and should be based solely on what an individual deems safe and appropriate for their situation. If and when a coworker shares their gender identity with you, they are entrusting you with private information, which in return you must keep highly confidential. Be mindful that your coworker may not have shared this information with others, and may not be ready to do so. It is not your place to publicly disclose their gender identity, commonly known as outing, and you should also never share the information with others without their consent. It is important to point out that outing someone in the workplace can negatively impact that individual's life, both in and outside of work. Some possible consequences include physical violence, harassment, loss of family and friends, eviction, and much more. Although the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, or GENDA, protects employees in New York State from gender-based discrimination, it still happens daily. This reality contributes to why so many members of the TGNC community choose not to disclose their gender identity in the workplace. Many may not know that they are protected and are worried about losing their job, while others may have previously experienced discrimination. To learn more about GENDA, please visit the New York State Division of Human Rights online at dhr.ny.gov/genda. New York State employees have the right to file a complaint of any gender-based discrimination that occurs in the workplace with the Office of Employee Relations Anti-Discrimination Investigations Division, also known as ADID. You do not have to notify your supervisor, HR, or management before filing, and you can submit complaints directly to ADID. To learn more, visit oer.ny.gov/anti-discrimination-investigations.
When you find yourself in a situation, like personally, found myself where I became comfortable with a certain crowd at my current job, and I did come out. And they were very open and understanding.
Staying closeted at work is a personal choice, and it's also a matter of safety. You have to be able to be comfortable with yourself and your coworkers.
I feel it's important that, when you show up to work, that you're able to be your authentic self. However, that decision is up to you. No one has the right to take that narrative from you or that decision from you. Everyone doesn't have to come out at the workplace to their family or to society.
About 5 minutes before the first meeting on my first day, I told my boss, and he's like, "Oh, great." And he pulls out his little script and he says, "Would you like me to change your pronouns for you? Because I had a little speech written for you." And I was blown away.
You're an excellent driver for a woman. Wow, you're pretty in tune with your emotions for a man. We've all heard these types of comments around the office, and commonly refer to them as backhanded compliments. Although at times they are said with the intent of being supportive, they can come across as offensive. In reality, these statements are gender-based microaggressions, which express a prejudiced attitude that invalidates a person's identity or experience. Unfortunately, microaggressions are often made towards members of a marginalized group, including those in the TGNC community. Now, let's do a quick exercise. Which of the following are microaggressions? Wow, I never would have known you used to be a girl. You need to shave if you're trying to look like a real woman. I never would have guessed you're trans. You look so good. Cool, you're my first trans coworker. So when are you going to choose which gender you are? No surprises here. All of these comments are microaggressions. Now, let's look at the reasons why. Wow, I never would have known you used to be a girl. Even if this comment is meant to be a compliment about the person's appearance, it can be triggering and offensive to a transgender person to bring up the sex they were assigned at birth. You need to shave if you're trying to look like a real woman. This statement is rooted in the gender stereotype that to look like a real woman, a person must also shave their face and body hair. Also, the word real is problematic, as it implies that the person in question is not a real woman already. What is a real woman anyway? This subjective term is rooted in gender stereotypes. I never would have guessed you're trans. You look so good. Although it's meant as a compliment, this comment implies that transgender people don't typically look good. Good is a subjective term. Also, it's impossible to guess who is or is not transgender because we can't know a person's gender identity unless they tell us. Cool, you're my first trans coworker. Although this seems to be a supportive statement, categorizing a coworker by using trans can make it seem as if the speaker is keeping track of a quota of different coworkers. It can also make the person feel like a target or a representative of all trans people, which reduces all trans people to their gender identity. So, when are you going to choose which gender you are? This statement is rooted in the myth that LGBTQ+ people choose their identity or are confused about who they are. Not to mention, it reinforces the gender binary. Also, the tone of the question is very casual, but a person's gender identity, as well as their gender expression, is deeply personal, and not something others should comment on. Members of the TGNC community have a right to use the restroom most consistent with their gender identity and comfort, regardless of the sex shown on their identification. Supervisors cannot require proof of gender identity before allowing an individual to use either the men's room or the women's room. Furthermore, a New York State agency cannot require a TGNC person to use a different restroom to accommodate an employee or customer who has a complaint. If the individual making the complaint expresses discomfort with sharing an all-gender restroom, the agency may accommodate that individual by allowing them to use a single-occupancy restroom.
Dealing with using which bathroom should I use, especially early on in transition, I think that's one of the biggest issues that all trans people experience.
I feel more comfortable using the women's room at work than I do in other public places, just because I know that there is policy at the place where I work protecting my gender as a protected class.
I have been asked to use the men's room on several occasions. It is not the right thing to do at the workplace. My experience going to the women's room at work has made it easier for me to say, I am Julia, this is my bathroom.
For more information regarding gender identity or expression in the workplace, please refer to Equal Employment Opportunity in New York State, Rights and Responsibilities, a handbook for employees of New York State agencies, which is available on the New York State Office of Employee Relations website. In this handbook, you will find references to statewide policy and protections against discrimination and harassment applicable to state workplaces, including those found in the New York State human rights law and federal law. Examples of guidance provided in the handbook include, while discrimination on the basis of gender identity or expression can take many forms, it includes but is not limited to unwelcome verbal or physical conduct, such as derogatory comments, jokes, graffiti, drawings or photographs, touching, gestures, or creating or failing to remedy a hostile work environment. Retaliation is also prohibited. Failure to use the name, title, or pronoun preferred by the employee may constitute a violation of the state's gender identity or expression anti-discrimination policy. No decision affecting hiring, promotion, firing, or a term, condition, or privilege of employment shall discriminate on the basis of a person's gender, identity, or expression, nor shall employees be harassed or otherwise discriminated against on such basis or perceived basis, and so much more. Please be advised, any conduct that may not amount to a violation of state or federal law or an executive order may nonetheless constitute a violation of the state's anti-discrimination policy as outlined in this handbook, resulting in a possible investigation by the Office of Employee Relations Anti-Discrimination Investigations Division.
As you can see, gender identity is deeply personal, and we should not perpetuate the stereotypes that have been hurtful and offensive to many for generations. It is your role and responsibility as a New York State employee to respect all gender identities and expressions, and to create an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcomed, represented, and affirmed. You should now understand the nature of gender identity and the terms used to refer to a person's identity, why it's important to use someone's name and pronouns, how and why it is a best practice to use gender-neutral language, the importance of maintaining confidentiality regarding someone's gender identity, and how to recognize and avoid using gender-based microaggressions. To learn more, check out further learning in the New York statewide learning management system under the title Gender Identity Toolkit. There you will find the most up-to-date language primer, information on how to be a supportive ally, and so much more. You're encouraged to take a look and refer to it often. With a better understanding of the world around us, we can work together and create a safe, inclusive, and affirming work environment for everyone. Thanks for watching.